Hi folks, hey, by gum. Here we go with another video, and this time I'm going to talk a little bit about a very simple technique for exposure blending. Now, the other day over on my Patreon channel, I produced a video on something that's called Rapid Blend If, and I'll put a link to a video where I've showed you how to do that before on my main YouTube channel. But now I'm going to illustrate another technique which is, really very misunderstood, not very often used, not very often demonstrated. And of course, when people think of exposure blending nowadays, you sort of start thinking about using things like Luminosity or some other Luminosity Mask Action panel. And really and truly, we don't need to do that because, I mean, these Luminosity Mask Action panels, I know they confuse a lot of people. And really, I want to show you how to basically use a particular method where we can make the image generate its own luminosity masks on the fly. And it is up here, and it's under image, and it's called apply image. And I'm just going to turn the preview off, and this is the panel that we're going to be using to blend these three exposures together. So as you can see, we've got a light exposure, we've got our camera's metered exposure, and we've got our dark exposure. But I'm going to start over in Lightroom, because if you're a member over on my Patreon channel, you will be able to download the original raw files, as you can do with every demonstration video that I produce and put up on YouTube. And so there you go. There's another benefit of being a member of my Patreon channel. Yes, you gain access to all my raw files that I use in the demos. So I'm going to head back over to Lightroom in this instance. I'm not going to use Raw Therapy to process these raw files, although we could easily use Raw Therapy or any other raw processor. So here we've got the three images. Now, these three images are a little bit on the faulty side. As you can see, they shot at f11. And this is Magpie Mine over in Bakewell, or near Bakewell, just outside of Bakewell in the Peak District in Derbyshire, over here in the UK. And fundamentally, this is me setting a shot up to get me foreground for a actual Milky Way exposure, rather akin to this. Okay, but they do take a little bit to setting up. And as you can tell from the way things are leaning backwards, I've got the camera tilted up quite markedly. I'm at 15mm on the 1424 Nikon f2.8, and so even though I'm at f11, my foreground, or my immediate foreground, is not as sharp as it could be. So there you go. But anyway, there we go. I knew I was going to crop the image anyway, so I set it up just a little bit wider so I can crop some of the more out of focus foreground out in the finalised image. And anyway, but that's beside the point. So we've got these three raw files here. That's our light frame, or our overexposed frame. This is our camera's metered frame, and this is one stop under, or one stop underexposed. Now, they both, or all three of them, have got Lightroom's rubbish background contrast increases on them. So the first thing I'm going to do is select all three, take them over to the develop module, apply a simple process version swap to attempt to get contrast under control. I'm going to come to the middle exposure, so that's the one I'm working with. I'm going to put the exposure back. Because I've got auto sync enabled, the exposures have been brought back to 0 on all three. I'm going to leave the contrast slider where it is, and I'm going to leave the black slider where it is. And fundamentally, I'm going to leave it as it is, apart from one thing. And I'm going to come to details, and I'm just going to take the sharpening down a little bit, because sharpening in Lightroom can produce halos, which can sort of make your images go a little bit if you're not careful. So fundamentally, we're done. Now, the same with the rapid blend if method of blending exposures. Your problems arise when you've got things in the sky or somewhere in your shot that move. And if you look at these very high stratus clouds here, on my dark exposure, they're a little bit further to the right and a little bit further back in the frame. And on my light exposure, they are a little bit to the left and a little bit further forward in the frame relative to the buildings. And of course, we can go to photo in over here in Lightroom, photo merge HDR. But we all know it's going to make ghosts of those clouds. And, you know, is it worth bothering with? No, not really. There's a lot more precise way of doing things, and it's called Photoshop. Yeah, and all the old ways are always the best. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to right click, and I'm just going to go edit in, open as layers inside of Photoshop. So here we are with those three exposures in three separate layers inside one document inside of Photoshop. Now, the first thing I want to do is to take the lighter of the three frames and I want to put it on the top of the stack. Okay, so here I've got my metering +1 exposure. On this next layer, I've got the metering -1 exposure. And there is, on the bottom now, my metered exposure. It's really simple. And all we want to do now is to, with the visibility of the darker underexposed and the lighter overexposed frames turned off, first of all, I want to come to the darker frame, make it the active layer, even though the visibility is turned off. And I want to add a white layer mask. I'm then going to come to Image, and I'm going to go to Apply Image. And I'm just going to leave it and make sure that you've got these settings in there. Layer, merged, channel, RGB, blending, multiply, opacity 100%, and we're just going to click OK. And as you can see, if I hold down the Alt key, you can see it's actually generated its own luminosity mask. Isn't that cool? But of course, what does that luminosity mask do? Well, if I go and reveal or turn on the visibility of the layer, you can see down in the bottom of the sky, it's actually put a little bit of, it's taken the highlights down a little bit. Now, fundamentally, we could actually reduce that effect quite simply by making sure we're on the active mask. I always like to turn the visibility back off, and I could go again up to Image, Apply Image, and just apply the image again. And now you can see that if I hit the Alt key, I've now got a much darker, in effect, luminosity mask. Okie dokie. And of course, if I now turn that visibility on, you can now really see the fundamental change that it's making to the image. Now, really and truly, I only want you to concentrate on the buildings and the things that aren't moving in the image. And so we've done a really good job of blending those two exposures. But all we've done is blend the underexposed frame with the metered exposure. The critical thing comes when we want to blend in the highlights. And so I need to turn the visibility of this layer off again, come to the top layer, the overexposed layer, and add a white layer mask all over again. And the reason I need to keep the visibility of these layers turned off is when I come to image and I go to apply image, we're working on merged. Now I don't really want to see a merge of these three layers, because if I've got the visibility turned on, it will merge the three layers, and so the values in this mask will be different. However, there's another thing. The thing is, I'm working with highlights now, and so I do not really want to see a boatload of highlights revealed, because when we shoot an overexposed frame, yes, quite often we're conscious of not blowing the highlights if we're exposing to the right, but really and truly, that frame or an overexposed frame is actually being done for the benefit of the shadows. So what we're interested in doing is actually revealing the shadowy, darker tone content. And as you can see in this little thumbnail of the mask here, all the things we're wanting to see out of this frame are actually darker than the sky. It's the sky that we don't actually want to see. So what I'm going to do is click invert, and now you can see all our foreground has become lighter in the little thumbnail of the mask here. And so we'll click OK, just like that. And then what I can do is just go and turn on the visibility of our underexposure and of our overexposure. And there we go. So we've got a really, really nice blend on the foreground, on the buildings. And if we go into 100%, you can see they're blended. There's no halos, there's no nothing. The blend is seamless. However, we do have a little bit of a disparity in the sky, because as with any other exposure blend or exposure blending technique, we need to compensate for subjects or things in the image which actually move. In other words, when you do an HDR merge inside a Lightroom, you've got the anti-ghosting job, and that's what it's trying to do. It's trying to mask out things that haven't moved or things that have moved. So all I'm going to do is just come out to a fit to screen view, and this is so simple to actually mask out this sky. I'm just going to come to the channels, and the sky is fundamentally blue, so I'm going to look for the channel which has the greatest degree of contrast between the foreground and the sky. Is it the green channel or is it the blue channel? It's the blue channel. The blue channel is the one where the sky is looking at its lightest. So all we're going to do is to make a copy of the blue channel, and there it is. And then we're going to come to image, adjustments, and we're going to pull up curves. And I'm just going to bring the dark slider all the way over to the right until all the detail in the foreground goes black. I'm then going to get the highlight slider, and I'm going to bring it over to the left as much as I can until things are looking very white in the sky. You don't want to make it go vertical, otherwise the mask will go a little bit yucky. So we're just going to click OK on there, and then I am going to get my pen tool, and I'm going to select my brush, and I'm going to be painting with white in the overlay blend mode. So if your brush is in the normal blend mode, come down and bring it into the overlay blend mode. And so painting with white, it's only going to actually add white to this channel mask where the tones are above 50% luminosity. Okay, so that's middle grey up to 255 is just going to turn white wherever I place this brush. And so all we're going to do is just very simply just sweep across the image. And of course, where the tones are less than mid-tones, that white is not going to have any effect at all. So fundamentally, now we've got a mask where all the foreground is masked out and all the sky is white. So I'm now going to reactivate the RGB. I'm going to turn off the blue copy. I'm going to come back to layers. And these two images here are really the only two things that are stopping us from seeing the sky in our original metered image. So if I turn those two layers back on, and then I select these two layers, and then I go and place them inside a new group, we'll just leave it called group 1, and then I can go to select, load selection, blue copy, and what I'm going to need to do is to invert that blue copy, and there we are, and there is the active selection that you can see, and I'm just going to add that as a layer mask. So there you go. Now we've got our nicely blended 3 exposures for our foreground, and we've got a cracking sky out of our original metered exposure. How cool is that? That's really simple, and really nice simple workflow that hopefully you can all understand. And so I'm just going to take it up to 100%. And you might say, yeah, but Andy, you took a load of sharpening off. Yeah, I did. So let's go and put some sharpening back on. This isn't the way I would do it if I was creating what I might term a masterpiece image. Certainly not. But I can show you very efficiently and very quickly how to actually do this. So what we'll do is we'll do a stamp visible layer. Okay, so that gives us a fresh copy or flattened copy of this entire layer stack. And I'm just going to go to filter, and I'm going to go to sharpen, and we'll go to unsharp mask, and with a default setting of 200 amount and a radius of 0.5, I can click OK. And you can see now everything's gone really nice and super sharp. The only problem is I've actually gone and sharpened the sky. And I don't really want to do that, do I? No, I don't. Andy doesn't need to sharpen the sky because he doesn't want to, because it's an undesirable effect which just emphasises noise in low frequency detail areas. Now, funnily enough, we've got a mask here, haven't we, on this group 1, which isolates the sky. Yes, we have. So, if I just put my cursor over this mask and command click on that mask, I load up that mask as a selection. With the new sharpened layer, all I've got to do is add that mask again, and now I've gone and removed all the sharpening from the sky, but it's now still here on all my foreground. So there you go, guys. A nice, easy, simple way to blend 3 exposures without having to revert to complex luminosity masks, which are in effect the big daddy of layer masking and exposure blending. But if you are struggling with understanding luminosity masks, just try using apply image, and I'm sure you'll agree it can produce some spectacularly good results with a very, very easy and simple workflow. Okay, guys and gals, don't forget, if you remember over on my Patreon, you can get hold of those 3 raw files that we've just used in this demonstration, and you too can work along with Andy. Oh, it's like listening to Watch with Mother. Oh, that dates me a bit, doesn't it? Yes. Hey. All right, guys and gals, stay safe, stay well, keep taking the pictures. Don't do anything I wouldn't do, so that gives you plenty of scope, and I'll see you in the next one. Tooroo.